Good evening. I'm Socrates Garrett, and we're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, the heart of the Deep South, right here in the African-American-owned broadcasting studio. WeBelieveDigital.com, our own platform. And so it's critically important that in the African-American community, we control the narrative. I look forward to receiving opportunities to show and advertise your products for goods and services and to move your brand along in this community. We're broadcasting live on Facebook. On We Believe Digital Podcast, go to Roku and download our app, and We Believe Global, with shows like this to bring articulate, intelligent conversations and dialogue to our platform. So I'm here to continue sounding the alarm. This is how the South is going to rise again. Good evening, and welcome to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. We're broadcasting live from an African-American-owned broadcasting studio, one of its only kind throughout the Southeast. We're being seen live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Roku TV, and more importantly, on our very own platform, WeBelieveDigital.com. Now, if you're watching us on We Believe Digital, we want you to donate to this program to help us finance this great work that we're doing. If you're watching us on YouTube, we want you to go ahead and subscribe. Our subscribers numbers are growing every day. And on Facebook, we want you to send stars and like this program. Share it with your friends and families. You can reach out to us at 800-492-5186 if you want to participate in this program. Now, as always, you know, my distinguished co-host is Dr. Eldridge Henderson. A man who needs no introduction. I like to say that a man who was born on a plantation and has risen to heights that very few are able to obtain. He is now Dr. Eldridge Henderson. We're going to talk to him a little bit about that journey from the plantation to where he is today. We're also going to review 2022 and talk about some of the significant things that happened there that impacted the African American community. Dr. Henderson.
Yes, sir.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. The first show in 2023.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Look, now, we got a lot to talk about. Mississippi in 2022, and specifically in Jackson, Mississippi, did not fare well. There are so many negative incidents that happened in our city in 2022 until it may be considered the worst year that we've had as a state in a long, long time. And so I want to talk about a few of those things. One, naturally, we're going to talk about the water crisis and the state takeover and the ultimate federal government takeover of Jackson's water system. We also want to talk about the tremendous scandal, the welfare scandal that took place in Mississippi and was brought to light in 2022 and the impact that it had on our state. We want to talk about Mississippi's a large prison population and Mississippi's standards when it comes to health care and education and Medicaid expansion and why not. So let's jump right into it. Tell the viewing audience a little bit about who you are and where you come from, and then we'll get into it.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Socrates. Before I do that, I want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to work with you again. Yeah, I'm what I call an old po' boy from the Delta in Mississippi. I was born in the Delta in the 1940s, ladies and gentlemen. So you can know now I've been around a long time. And in less than a week, my parents moved to Hinds County, Mississippi, on a smaller plantation. And we lived on that plantation for 17 years right here in Hinds County, Mississippi. We had wonderful opportunities there. There were 4 things that were guaranteed. We never had to worry about a job. We had a guaranteed job. We were always told that if you worked for yourself on the plantation, you didn't have anything to worry about because you would get $2 a day. They guaranteed that we would have food. They gave us a free house. We called it free. And you had health care if you could get just a little bit of health care to keep you alive. So that's guaranteed. You had a free house, you had an educational opportunity to the 8th grade, but you couldn't go to school every day. You had to agree to go when you could, and that's usually 1 or 2 days a week. And if it didn't rain, you could go 3 days out of a 5-day period. And the good part about it, when you turn 16, you can get on the plantation as an individual, as an adult, and he will give you a house, take you to Raymond, Mississippi, and you can buy you a used car. And they guarantee you a job as long as you want it, and you could work overtime. You could work $2 a day, 7 days a week. My job, when I turned 16, if something hadn't happened that changed my life, I would have been able to get $2 a day, baling hay, fix his fence, and driving a tractor. And I was ready to do that when I finished the 8th grade. But something happened. The Hinds County supervisors opened a high school in Hinds County, and it was in the city now called Clinton, Mississippi. At the time, it was a rural Hinds County area. And that made my parents decide that with my wonderful 8th grade education, where I could barely read and write, I was able to go to high school. They demanded that I go to high school, and that hurt my heart because I had already picked out my house. I had thought about a good used car from the car lot, and I had already identified a young lady that lived down the road there that I was going to ask to move with me when I turned 17. And all of that was messed up, sir. All of it.
Simply because they opened up a high school.
That's right, and my parents demanded that we go to high school.
Well, Dr. Henderson, just how poor were people in Mississippi period back in the 40s and 50s?
Well, they were real poor, Mr. Socrates, but now we were very fortunate. Since we lived on a plantation, we were not considered poor. We were po, P-O. The other blacks in the area that lived, as we call free people on their own land, they were poor. Some of those same people had to go to the same plantation owner and get their food, clothing, and shelter, and pay for it any way they could, usually ended up on the book just like those that lived on the plantation. And they made sure that you couldn't make any side money, because if you made side money, you had to pay the sheriff. You sold a little dope, sold a little whiskey, you had a little prostitution down at your little club that you had way down in the woods. If you made a little whiskey on the side, I mentioned earlier, you had to pay the sheriff a little bit for that. And it was very difficult, but a lot of black people that were not on the plantation that had side businesses and had their own small farms, and some were able to lease land from the plantation owners. They did real good. They were poor blacks. And we had 100% segregation during that time in Mississippi and Hinds County. I mean, 100%.
100%.
And that means you couldn't go to town in peace. You would see the Ku Klux Klan from time to time. You knew exactly who they were. Sometimes they would have their masks on the weekend, and they didn't think we knew who they were because we knew their voices, we knew their vehicles, and all you had to do, since we didn't have any sense, they didn't know to cover their tags up. And we knew exactly who they were. And some of those devils are still alive today. Today.
Probably doing well. So we're talking about things in Mississippi. In a recent article in the Mississippi Link newspaper by Emily Waxter Pettis from the Associated Press that was published just the week of January the 5th in the Mississippi Link newspaper, it reads, in Mississippi, where elected officials have a long history of praising self-sufficiency and condemning federal anti-poverty programs, a welfare scandal has exposed how millions of dollars were diverted to the rich and powerful, including pro athletes, instead of helping some of the neediest people in the nation. Now, Doc, how could you have a welfare scandal in the poorest state in the nation where the need is so great? It seems like if any dime came up missing, you would have been aware of it. How can that happen in Mississippi?
Well, it happened specifically by design. The federal government knows that most of the people in the South, the North, East, and the West, especially the politicians, are taking money from the federal government and abusing it and misusing it. But it's just very well known in the South because nobody knows there's be no punishment there. And it's been historically part of the Constitution to keep blacks economically in what I call a state of poor nature. You're not going to pass any law that can give them proper medical care, proper shelter, proper food. If you do that for blacks and poor whites in this state, you will have a revolution. They will start getting a very good education. They will start voting. They will start running for public office. And you would have a coalition of poor folks, but not as a unit, seeking some of the goods and services in the state. So the special interest groups, specifically the Europeans in Mississippi, that have leadership positions that have those college degrees from Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and other places, they make sure they control two things: politics and corporate affairs, including the banks.
Now, Mississippi has a population of greater than 40% African Americans. So we're well represented here, and you keep talking about a group that is controlling. We have more elected officials than any other state in the nation. I mean, we might be rivaled by Alabama, but we have more blacks in Mississippi than any other state in America. And if you have that greater number, that population, you ought to be able to gain control. You ought to be able to have the ability to get power. Why is that not coming to Mississippi?
Well, it's very simple. Another case of design by design. The people that put the Constitution together in 1780 and 1880 in Mississippi, and during a period of 10 years, said that black people were still quasi-slaves. They are not going to vote. They are not going to get a good education. And they are not going to have any kind of economic influence other than they're going to get the jobs that we give them. And that was mandated in the Constitution. And that happened up until the 1960s. And just because you have 37 or 38 or 40% blacks in Mississippi does not mean anything.
Well, you were the same person that told me that the slavery could have ended in 60 days because there were more blacks in Mississippi than whites at one time. And if they had all come together and rebelled, they could have ended slavery in 60 days.
They could have done it.
So today, with 40% of the population, we ought to be able to gain economic power with this population.
Well, ought to. But see, the scenario has changed. See, a lot of black people have been coerced and compromised, believing that they are full-fledged citizens. They have their little college degree from these senior colleges and universities in the state. They are considered an excess, and they are considered a necessity for the white people. And they give those folks jobs in lower-level management positions. They give the high-yellow girls jobs in the bank as tellers and so forth. And they give the few males a job at the higher level, about 1 out of 100, if he is not too black. And they give those guys the entryway into the black community as vice president of community affairs, corporate affairs, diversity. And those people are able to move into the black community, find out what they need and what they want. They go back and talk to the white corporate leaders, and they then decide how they're going to do the strategy to keep the black people poor. If they know the black people have a lot of education, have pretty good money, had a qualification as a credentials to do something, the next thing they're going to do is go to the legislature and up the ante for the requirements. If you need $50,000 to qualify for something, you're going to need $60,000 if you go in as a black person.
Now, Doc.
Yes, sir.
Doc, we gotta rebel. We gotta fight our way through this. And you are seeming to say to me that we have something called friendly fire from black people that's keeping us down. It's part of the oppressive group that has always been in place. That John Horn, the senator, once put it, that black folk are now out white folk and the white folk.
That's a fact. Senator Horn is exactly right. Black people are in a worse position economically, socially, and politically now than they were during Reconstruction.
Wow.
And that was about 4 years after slavery. In worse position. Just because you have a title as a political mayor, county supervisor, legislature, or whatever, means nothing if you don't have the ability to get with the opponents, and be able to work out a deal. Black folks have no power at all in the legislature, none, and therefore, since the Republicans control all the committees, all the money, all the votes of any significance, they know black folks not going to organize and pool their resources. They're just going to say, in secret, I want Mr. White Man to get elevated on this committee, and I'll help you get what you want.
Well, I don't think that was always the case in Mississippi, because we have some iconic leaders that have come from Mississippi, people who gave their lives in this struggle. Medgar Evers gave his life in this struggle. Vernon Damer gave his life in this struggle. Martin Luther King gave his life in this struggle. So people were fighting to make a difference. So we haven't always been compromised.
No, but see, those were the real Negroes. These people I'm talking about today are man-made Negroes, these current politicians and many of the preachers. They don't know about the period that I'm talking about. Now, their parents do, but their parents were the one that was fighting for integration, where they demanded that their kids go down to the white school and be beaten, criticized like a dog, called all kind of bad names. And they felt good to say my child integrated elementary school X or high school B.
Now, Doc, I got to get some better understanding of what is a man-made Negro. Now, I thought that all of them were man-made, but you seem to be making a difference.
Oh,
here.
yeah, there is a difference. There are some naturally born black people that have a desire to better themselves and then bring others up. But when you are taken from your society, from your church, from your school, from your social clubs, and then put into the opposite clubs, schools, churches, and so forth, you are then renewed, remade, and you are what I call a hybrid, even though you look just like the other black folks in the community. To give you an example, you would go to the white church. You leave your Methodist church or your Baptist church, go to the black church, white church. And they don't want you there, but they want to be integrated. So they're going to get the top blacks they can find to come there. And they know that black going to be glad to be there. He is going to tithe to the maximum. He's going to give the offerings. But you're not going to ever see him in a leadership position. You might put one in the choir. You might put one over the janitors in the church and call him an administrator. And you want to give at least one or two black men a chance to be in security, where they out there directing white traffic. And when that happens, then they get the lot taken care. They come back in church, put a little vest off, and sit back there in the back until they get ready to go.
Doc, this is too deep. Now, you are describing a scenario and a situation that is akin to a drug dealer.
Of course. Somebody
that's selling drugs in our community that's destroying our children. You are saying that we have people in elected positions that are doing the same thing with policies and going along, and it's destroying our children.
Well, you have
that's a pretty strong indictment.
Of course it is, because you have a twofold situation. You got the drug dealers in the black community doing the same thing. You have the elite so-called blacks that went to these white universities that belong to First Baptist Church and others. They are doing the same thing to keep the so-called middle-class blacks out. So until blacks start pooling their resources and forgetting about their so-called color and where they attended school and what white man they can go to and borrow enough money to get a house where they can't pay for it in 30 years, we're going to be the same. So that's why I say, if you think we're bad in 2022, you wait until the end of 2023.
Well, 2022 was bad. It was real bad in Mississippi. I mean, we had a water crisis like we've never seen before. Every major news outlet was in Jackson, Mississippi. People calling every day want to know how's the water in Mississippi. Do you have any drinking water? You can't drink it. You can't take a bath in it. You can't flush your commodes. It was bad, Doc, and so bad that the governor of the state of Mississippi went on national TV and said that the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi was totally incompetent, not capable of running the water plant, and that he was taking it over. And he assumed control over the water plant in the state of Mississippi that belonged to the city of Jackson. Never heard of that before.
Well, you're going to hear things worse in 2023. See, the governor knows that if he can lambast the mayor and get him confused, he know the mayor's going to fight back. So that's the fight going. They already have some of the council members locked up on the city council, so they have about 4 of them that's going to go the way the governor wants them to go, even though a lot of people don't want to admit that. So no matter what happens, you're going to have friction and division with the mayor and the council and the governor. So that's going to get worse in 2023. You were talking about the water situation. It's 2023, and we haven't had any water yet. And the day, I believe, is the 5th day in January, where I go every day. We have not been able to flush the commode since before Christmas. They finally got a little water yesterday, but it drips. You still can't flush the commode in many parts of Northwest and South Jackson. I mean, today.
Now, since the governor took over the water plant back in 2022, there has been some new developments, so we don't want to confuse our viewers. So currently, the federal government has taken over the water plant, took it away from the state, and the feds have come in and they've hired a czar, a gentleman now who says he's running the water plant in Jackson, Mississippi, inclusive of the water billing department and the production department and the distribution department. How do you think that'll fare?
That's not going to work well. My research shows that we're going to have a serious water problem in the Jackson area for at least the next 3 years. I don't care how you fix that water plant. If you don't fix those veins and arteries that from the plant to the factories and to the homes in the city of Jackson, every year for the next 3 years is going to get worse. A good working water plant doesn't mean anything if you sneeze and it gets 30 degrees, pipes start bursting all over town. The businesses can't function. So they're going to start leaving. And that is exactly what the special interests want. They want Jackson to get so bad economically, socially, and politically, until the few black folks that are voting, only about 25 to 30% voting, will vote out the few blacks that's in there and put whites in office. And then the next year, the water problem be corrected. You have complete dominated police officers dominating the few blacks that are left, putting them in jail, shooting the others, and threatening those that don't shoot or put in jail. And you will have new members in the legislature from the city of Jackson that are European in color.
Now, we're talking about things that have happened in Jackson, Mississippi in 2022 and before. Dr. Henderson is also stating that 2023 is not going to be a very good year for Jackson and the state of Mississippi as well. We're getting ready to go to a station break, and so we want you to stay tuned with us. We're going to come back and continue this very important discussion about how things are and how we predict that they will be in the upcoming year. This is Socrates Garrett Live, broadcasting from right here in Jackson, Mississippi on We Believe Digital. Stay tuned.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world. blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Welcome back to Socrates Garrett Live. We're broadcasting live from right here in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the deep, deep South. You know, in the South, where I like to say that the air is just a little bit cleaner and the grass is just a little bit greener. We're a state of less than 3 million people, and most of us in the state are related to one another. We have more mulattoes in Mississippi than anywhere else in the country. That's because we have mixed families, but yet we don't get along. Yet there's a concerted effort to keep the black man and woman in poverty in this great state. And we know that by policies that are being made every day. The governor's refusal to accept Medicaid expansion into Mississippi is just one of those examples. Another of the examples is the governor had to send back the benefits for unemployment because he stated that the Mississippians were too lazy to come back to work after they received their unemployment check and sent the money back. Now, Mississippi is a welfare state. That means by that, every dollar that we send to Mississippi, we get $3 and change back. But yet we are a conservative state that follow the ideas and the ideologies of the Republican Party to a T. We are a deep red state, but we're poor. And we've been poor for the longest. We're ranked last in every major category of importers. And we've had some of the worst scandals that we've been talking about in 2022 and beyond that directly impacted poor people in Mississippi. We have the highest prison population of any state in the nation, and America has the highest prison population of any country in the world. And so while we're in the land of opportunity, we have policies and conditions that regulate us to the bottom in most categories. Now, this cannot continue. This cannot be, and black folk are going to have to do things to bring about the change. And what they're doing currently is not going to work, and that's all of the high murders and the killings that are taking place in the African American community. Jackson was ranked number 1 in crime in 2021. You know, right next to St. Louis, Missouri, you had 154 homicides in 2021. In 22, we had 140 homicides, and I had Chantel Johnson on the Heard Is the Same that you can see right here on this platform, who said there have been over 500 murders in this city in the last 5 years. So the strategy that black folk are employing, which is to kill one another, is not working. But then some of this is being predicated and regulated by what Dr. Henderson describes as a man-made Negro. And I didn't quite understand, and I want him to expound on that a bit, because my position is that Mississippi has had great leaders like Aaron Henry, like Medgar Evers, like Vernon Damer, and others. So in light of where we are, how do we create a man-made Negro?
It's very simple. Now let me give you the other end of this before we talk about this.
Yeah.
See, I told you you have two types of Negro. You have the man-made Negro, and you have what I call the self-made Negro. The self-made Negro are those black people that had very little originally in their lives. The parents were hard workers, very little education, but they wanted their kids to go to school, get a profession if possible, or at least become a school teacher or a preacher. Those are the self-made people. Then you have the man-made people, the black people, that were the descendants of those old people that I just mentioned that raised those boys and girls like Charles Evers, Medgar Evers, Miss Pittman and others, and Aaron Henry. The self-made folks, their children are now in the legislature. They are mayors in the city council. They are judges and so forth. But most of these people had a chance to go to the white colleges and universities because some of the black colleges and universities was not good enough, even though the parents might have graduated from Jackson State, Alcorn, MVSC, or Tougaloo. Many of their children, now that's in the legislature, that's in the mayor position and others, didn't attend school in Mississippi. They went elsewhere. So these are the man-made Negroes. They studied different things. They always said we. The others, man-made Negro, says us. They call blacks those people. Medgar Evers and his folks call blacks our people. So when those people are referenced by black people, they're talking about the underclass black people that they are descendants from, but they don't want to associate with. So when they got the first chance to leave, they left the black community. They moved to the suburbs and others. A lot of those white folks that controlled them encouraged them to get loans and move to my neighborhood. But only one or two of you all now can get in a gated community, but the rest of you can live out in the suburb close to us. And we'll let you visit us every now and then. We want to tell you what you have to do. And those black folks, like Medgar Evers, Mr. what the guy's name you said, Vernon Damon, stayed in the black community, worked in the black community, and made decisions for my people. These others make decisions for those people, but they don't ever announce what they do. I talk to some often. They say, well, we're working on things. We can't talk about what we are doing, but we're going to help y'all out. Things will get better.
Going to help y'all out.
That's what we say. Those people, we're going to help them. We'll help them out. Now, this is going on today as we speak.
Wow. Now, let's go back to the Mississippi Link for a moment. In this same article by Emily Pettis, it states that it's shameful and disgusting, especially when Mississippi, a state where we hear discussions every year about poor people not needing resources and poor people being lazy and just needing to get up and go to work. That's what the leadership in the state of Mississippi, the European leadership, and maybe some of the African American leadership say about the citizens in Mississippi, that you are just lazy. And it's shameful that you won't get off of your butt and go to work. And yet Mississippi has the lowest minimum wage in the country. And we have the highest unemployment. I believe unemployment in the African American male community is greater than 40%.
It is.
I believe it's greater than 40%, Doc.
It is greater.
And so at this same time, we have people saying that we're lazy and shiftless and irresponsible, and we find ourselves in a perpetual state of poverty and economic delusion.
That is a fact. And this situation is going to get worse because you will see when you came along, when I came along, and our brothers and sisters, when we finished high school, we could have a skill or a trade, a technical or vocational job if we wanted to. When I finished high school, I could have been a carpenter, a bricklayer, auto mechanic. But when my son went to high school, they didn't have those trades. He would have to finish high school and join a community college or a private college in order to become an auto mechanic, or go to that one or two schools for dropouts that they call career development centers. And you had to be 16 to 24 to get in those. But you had to have a little clout to get in there. If you're a real bad black person that was kicked out of school, you couldn't go. If you had a special education certificate, they might let a few of you go, but you couldn't get a credential, even if you went 5 years, because you didn't have what they call the right education. So you would get out a job as an auto mechanic with a social promotion and couldn't even spell car. You see, you got social promoted up until a few years ago throughout the South. That's the situation. So it hadn't gotten any better, it's gotten worse. So those very people that can't work, that are called lazy, they really can't work. They can't do very much. Due to technology, automation, and robots, you don't have a lot of jobs that someone can do that they used to do with their hands.
Not anymore.
When I came along, you can get a job in construction. My dad worked in construction 30 years. He never used a backhoe, never used a bulldozer. They built subdivisions in northeast Jackson, in Vicksburg, and other places. Matter of fact, he worked on Presidential Hills in Jackson. He said he and those black men dug all the foundations with picks and shovels. Right now, a black man can't get a job doing pick and shovel work. They want him to drive the backhoe. But where are you going to get that training? The white boys got that training.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Right. So we're at a state. We got to go back, and in Mississippi we have legislation that keeps us from teaching black history in our school system. It's critically important that we understand why that is, because the history of Mississippi is not something to be proud of. African Americans have been treated rough in Mississippi from the beginning of slavery. Doc, you have talked to me on times about how bad slavery was. And I know that there are viewers out there that say, you guys just got to get over it. You got to get over it. You got to do like Haley Barber said, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And you can't keep talking about, the situation and the circumstances that you came from. But the reason we keep talking about it is because it's getting worse. We believe that blacks were better off in 1970 than they are in 2023. Blacks own more land in the 1900s than they do in 2023. Blacks had more businesses. We had more people that were middle class landowners than we have today. So there is something here that we got to talk about that's taken us back to a period of time that rivals when we first came over here on those very, very dangerous ships that brought us over here. And yeah, there are my European brothers with their talk shows out there every day that says, well, white folk didn't sell you into slavery. It was your own people that sold you into slavery. And now our own people may be a part of everything that's happened to us that is bad, including what's going on today.
Of course.
That's a shame and a disgrace.
Well, it was just the culture and the history of those Africans to fight each other. It was just like the Europeans were fighting each other. They had slaves, they had serfs, they had all kinds of people that were considered worse than slaves. They were locked in on the land. They were locked out of education. They were locked out of the court system. They could be picked up and put in prison if they wanted to. They could be picked up and put in prison and say you can't get out unless you pay your debt. They know they couldn't get out, so they served 30 and 40 years. It got so bad and had so many of them in Europe, they had to send them to America, you see. Then the Africans, on the other hand, fought each other, put their friends and neighbors and tribes in slavery. They pulled them into the coastal area, and the European was there, smiling and skinning and grinning with their little flags and little soldiers, a few weapons, and red scarves and jewelry and stuff, and gave it to blacks. And they bought those blacks and put them on ships, and the blacks were accustomed to selling their slaves and putting them down into the interior, selling them to the next chief. So they weren't worried about it, because they were taught in a clannish manner. They were tribe types people. If you were not of the right clan, the right tribe, didn't speak the right dialect, you're not part of us. The Europeans did the same thing. That's why they had so many wars in Europe. The Germans, the French, the Vassals, and others, the Turks, getting into the Middle Eastern part. People throughout the history of mankind never did like each other. Cain and Abel, which only had a few people in the world, didn't like each other. And that started all this killing and what I call human hatred. That's when you just had a few hundred or a few thousand in the world. Now we have about 7 or 8 billion. And we hate each other worse now. You still have gradualism, regionalism, statism.
Well, is this hate something that's permanent? That's something that...
It is. You don't have to go any further. It's permanent. Man was made to always want more than he deserved. He always wanted what you had, and he wanted to take it if you didn't give it to him. And if you didn't give it to him, he had 3 ways to get it. He would take it by force, he would kill you and get it, or he'd take it from you after he put you in prison, or make you economically dependent where you can't even get a job. So that means you had to work for him or get in his prison system for 10, 30, or 40 years and leave your woman there to take care of the children. And then he controlled the woman.
We're in Mississippi, in the deep, deep South. We're having this conversation about Mississippi, but it applies to African Americans throughout the world. We're finding that the conditions of Africans are similar throughout the entire world. We wonder about how Haiti is so poor. And why is it as poor as it is when that island and that part of the country and that region is so beautiful? We wonder about why Africans in other parts of the world are poor and displaced. And it happens everywhere we go. When we look at the brutal war that's going on in Ukraine, when African Americans were trying to leave that country, they were told to get off the bus, that they could not go. Doc, we are not thought highly of, not only not in Mississippi, but anywhere in the world. And I'm not sure how in the world we earn that status.
Well, I'm going to tell you why it happened. A lot of people don't know ancient black history. The ancients, we call it the ancient Africans. I'm not talking about the Arab Africans or the European Africans. Those real Africans that were bred and born in Africa were some of the greatest fighters in the world during that time. They had some of the best education in the world. They were lawyers and scientists and doctors, invented all kinds of things, could do surgery back in ancient times, can actually heal the sick. Now it's almost against the law they heal the sick. They are rather for you to stay alive now and get a lot of drugs for 30 or 40 years than to heal you. Back in those days, they would give you operations, and if you didn't die on the spot, you would live. They could do that complicated surgery. But now you don't find that happening. So when they had black people back in those days that were able to do things, they were great warriors, and they could fight, and they started moving around through Europe and Spain, Italy, places like that. And they said, we got to curtail these people. And that's when they started what we call this Mongolizing black folks. Some of y'all call it making another new group. You call them mulattoes and others, Quatrons, and so on. They made another new man, a new group, and told those high-colored Negroes in Europe, Asia, Africa, those folks are inferior. They are savages. You are part of us, so I'm going to let you work close to me. You're going to work in my house. You're going to work in my office, but you will be the clean-up person. You'll shine my shoes. They did to military guys. Just before I went in the military, black folks couldn't do certain jobs, but the Navy people had to take care of the food, shine the officers' shoes, and when they got in the Army, they put them in the ammo dumps and put them in transportation. And after a while, they put a few in MP, military police. That's basically what they could do. So man, it has never been good for the black man, because they know if they turn that black man loose and he gets a little more education, and he better not pool his resources and unify as black people all over the world, black people will control the world in 15 years.
Doc,
if they just had equality. And the European Americans and worldwide will never freely give black people in Mississippi, in the South, in America, and the world equality. They will not do it.
Because they fear that black people will control.
That's right, because they know they have treated them so badly throughout the years. They don't want to go through the centuries in the future of being raped, murdered, burned alive, castrated, picking up the woman walking the street and violating her by taking her around the corner, going to the black man's house and telling his wife, when you blow the horn, to go out the back door and meet me in the back. I used to see that when I was a boy. White folks don't want that to happen to their people, so they're going to do everything they can to keep that from happening and keep the knowledge concealed. And I told you before, that's why I want to talk about critical race theory. A white person would pass a law and say we ain't going to talk about no critical race theory, and it's not even being taught.
You're not even being taught.
Because we don't want our kids to know about our history.
Let's go back to
they'll start committing suicide if they would know the history of Mississippi, the South, and the United States.
And suicide is not always a bad thing.
No, it's not illegal.
Back in the Mississippi Link, Robert Bob Anderson, the current Mississippi Department of Human Services Executive Director, told Democratic state lawmakers in October that about 90% of the people who apply for TANF in Mississippi don't receive it. 90% of the people who apply for assistance do not receive it, either because their applications are denied, because they abandon their application, or they just give up. Those who do qualify get the lowest payments in the country, according to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Now, we got it bad in Mississippi.
We got it bad, but that's nothing new, sir.
We got it bad, Doc.
That's nothing new.
But we got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, I'm told.
No, you can't do that because you have no boots. So what you're going to have to do is you got 2 pennies. You're going to have to get your 2 pennies and put with my 2 pennies and get me in an economic position where I'm semi-independent. Then I have to go and buy something that I sell to you. Then you have to find something to make and sell to me, and then I have to go out and pool my resource and get with another person and build a small little factory and sell those things to me in the local area, my other folks in this regional area, statewide and national. That's the only salvation for black folks. Self-control.
That's what we had in the beginning, before integration.
That's right.
We were self-sufficient.
Exactly right. Even during slavery. You had, according to Dr. Claude Anderson, over 200,000 free black people, and all of them were independent enough to make their own living, and you didn't find them down in the street somewhere dead from starvation. It didn't happen. They worked.
Answer this question for me, because we got a city that is 85% black. Got black government in both the city and the county. The school system and the airport, over $1 billion flow through black controlled hands every year. But yet we're last in everything.
It's going to be that way, sir.
So we can't blame that on the Europeans.
No, you can't blame it on the European directly. You blame it on them indirectly. Because the Europeans control the money. The blacks might be the mayor, might be in the county supervisor's position. They might be over the school board. But where's the money? The money is controlled by European Americans. It's in their banks.
How?
So whoever controls the money controls the policy.
Oh. So we are what you call symbols.
That's right.
We have titles with no authority.
No authority.
No ability to be self-sufficient. No ability to circulate the dollars amongst ourselves.
Not even where you're in the majority and when you have the money. For instance, a school superintendent is one of the less powerful persons around. They have very little power, but it sounds like a big job to be a superintendent of a public school, and you have access to $4 or $5 million that you can spend every year.
300 and some million goes through the school system.
That's right. Just in one county or one city. But you can't teach what you want to teach. The state can tell you what you can teach and what you can't teach. When you get ready to build something with the money that you think you have, they will tell you, well, you got to bid it out, and we're going to tell you who the contractor is going to be. And when there's a black contractor to try to get his self-certified, you have to pay $30,000 to get all the credentials, got to be bonded and so forth. And then they're going to tell you, well, you're not qualified for that, And when you get qualified, well, sir, Miss Socrates, you're supposed to be in business at least 5 years, and you've already don't have the appropriate bond, even though you could move this stuff or you can produce this. And believe it or not, you don't have enough capacity to do what we need you to do. Plus, your administrators are not certified or qualified to do it. So therefore, instead of you getting 15 or 20%, we're going to give you 2 to 5% of this contract. And all you're going to do is do what I tell you to do, move a few rocks here, paint a little building here, and we'll make all the decisions and give you a check.
So the state controls the money.
That's right.
And he that controls the money controls the outcome.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching Socrates Garrett Live. We hope you will join us next week as we continue to deal with the issues surrounding Mississippi and the world and how it impacts African Americans throughout this country. We're going to be inviting in 2023, we're going to invite more guests in and have a dialogue with them, especially our elected officials and those in positions of power. We want to talk to our black bankers. We want to talk to our black ministers about their role in changing the conditions of our people. Now, Dr. Henderson and I have been like John the Baptist, sounding off from the wilderness for a long, long time. He and I both have a lot of years that we can talk about and testify about how things were and how they are today and where we see them heading. And somebody needs to start listening, because what we are projecting is that Mississippi and African Americans are headed into a new realm of devastation, more poverty, more homelessness, economic deprivation than ever before in history in the land of the plenty. Dr. Henderson, any parting shouts before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just want people to understand that there are many solutions to these problems we just addressed. Personally, I will be providing solutions to all these things that I've mentioned, more so in 2023 than before. I have solutions in economic development, politics, religion, leadership, and education and training that can work in 30, 60, 90 days if black people would take advantage of it.
We look forward to Dr. Henderson bringing us those solutions in 2023. He said he's going to do more of that, and we certainly want him to do that right here on We Believe Digital. Those of you on YouTube, subscribe. Facebook, send stars and share this program with friends and family. On We Believe Digital, hit the donate button. We need fuel. We need the resources to continue and expanding our coverage of what's going on in the African American community. We cannot allow others to tell our story, to continue to keep our history, and to control the narrative. We must do that as African Americans. We're making a giant effort to be your voice right here in Mississippi at We Believe Digital. Until next week, we want to say good evening and stay safe.